Hi friends, it's me, Droolbatz. It's so nice to see you. Today I'm going to be discussing the 2011 found footage horror movie, 7 Nights of Darkness. I'm going to be discussing this movie based on its premise, its production value and artistic choices, and finally how it compares or contrasts to other films of the genre. I hope you enjoy. The premise is pretty simple. There's a haunted house, supposedly. There's 6 people who want to be on reality TV, and there's $1 million prize that will be split between whoever can last until the 7th night in this creepy haunted house. There's a few stipulations. There's 6 people, and there are 7 like manila envelopes, and there's a challenge inside each one, and each night in darkness they have to open up the envelope and do the challenge. For example, one night they have to do a seance, one night they have to do a little photo shoot, things like that. It seems pretty simple, and considering these people have never met each other before and they're just kind of thrown into the game with no real introduction, they actually seem to get along pretty well. Until the seance. When they start to perform the seance after exploring the house, this one girl gets really into it and starts talking about how, there's all these horrible things that happened here and she really wants to communicate with a ghost. She's kind of the only person who seems to really want to find ghosts. The other people are like, I'm here for the money, I don't want to see scary stuff. Things kind of go south after the seance. She starts acting both catatonic and then overly energetic. She starts knocking people over and screaming randomly, just freaking people out. They start to wonder if she is possessed or if she's a plant by the producers, set up to cause chaos and mayhem and scare them away from the prize. What's the truth though? You'll have to watch to find out. 7 Nights of Darkness is a comfortable length at 90 minutes long. Unfortunately, this movie doesn't have the best pacing in my opinion. It's not very structured. The movie has a lot of fun throwing you into the mix right away. You get thrown into the midst of the characters. There's not a lot of character introduction, just boom, you're in there, and they take off exploring the house, this haunted house that they're staying in. It takes a very long time for the actual action to start happening in this movie. It's very slow, and then the scares and the action and the important plot points are kind of sporadic. They weren't really planned, and they're not spaced out in a pleasing way. Additionally, most of the scares in this movie are off-screen. This movie relies a lot on either very subtle practical special effects or scares that are off-screen. The characters get scared. This is found footage, so they're holding their own camera, and they go, ah, and the camera shakes, or they're like, what was that? What was that? And so there's a lot of movement. There's not a lot of actual scares happening. It's more just that the viewer gets startled with a lot of the movement, but there's really not a lot of actual scary stuff or a lot of very visible stuff. A lot happens off screen. Just purely from a viewing standpoint, this movie does not have very good sound mixing. The talking is normal, sometimes it's quiet, and when the scary stuff starts happening, the screaming, it is so loud. I have to wonder if it's supposed to indicate that some people are closer to the camera than others, but there's a lot of screaming, and it's very loud. The talking, meanwhile, is normal. Sometimes it's even quiet. It was a little annoying. I thought the characters had a really fun dynamic, and I liked how the actors were. I thought they did their roles pretty well for the most part. This isn't a movie where you need to have really well-developed characters and have them have interesting backstories or anything like that. The movie briefly went into the motivations of each character. One girl, she really wants to find ghosts. One guy, he wants to kind of get famous. One guy wants money for his family, things like that. And that kind of stuff, it was nice. It's not necessary to the plot, and they didn't really waste a lot of time focusing on getting to know the characters. I'm actually okay with that in this case. I think taking a lot of time and building up each character would have been detrimental to the story. It would have made it longer than it is, and it would have added to this already exceptionally long introduction to the movie. Because this is a found footage movie from 2011 and they're in a dark building for the most part, it's a lot of grainy, dark shots, lights shining in the back with lens flares, things like that. It gave a very nostalgic feel. It may not be the most high definition, but I still thought it was fine. I enjoy a little bit of grain to film sometimes, so I enjoyed that. Unfortunately, the shots were not very creative. There was a lot of shaky cam, and it felt authentic, but it didn't feel artistic, and it wasn't memorable in any way. Most of the special effects were practical, and I was quite impressed with it. This movie clearly wasn't a high-budget movie, and I thought they did really well, actually, with the limits they had. They managed to be very convincing because they didn't try to push it. A lot of the scares were like someone darting down the hallway, or like there's a scene where there's pizza and there's maggots, and they literally just threw some maggots on a pizza. There's no special effects, nothing fancy, just actual maggots, presumably from a fish shop, thrown on pizza. I found that very endearing, and I liked it in that it was simple, but it wasn't a waste of their resources. This movie relies pretty heavily on its set, which is just this big empty building full of mold and like tiles falling down and stuff like that. So I was pretty impressed that they kept it simple because they were relying a lot on the fact that they were in a dark building, so they didn't need a lot anyway. And I was impressed. That felt very intentional. The rest of the movie, unfortunately, didn't feel as intentional. The sound mixing was terrible. The acting, it was fine. The script was nothing interesting. There are a couple of scenes that were scripted. I don't know how much of the movie was ad-lib and how much was scripted, but there's a couple of scenes that were very... They felt, to me, a little cringy and off. For example, the seance scene, which I keep referencing, but it was just very... What's the word I'm looking for? The girl who, seems to be acting possessed, it was a lot. So most of the performances, I think, were totally fine for the story that was being told. There are one or two spots where it jumps out as like, tone it down, you know what I mean? Most of the movie felt very natural. It was clear they were just talking and chattering, but this particular scene felt very scripted. I wouldn't normally care, but it was jarring to go from like, natural to scripted and stuff like that. So I found it kind of jarring. Altogether, this was a low-budget movie. I was impressed with some elements of it, but overall, the movie didn't seem to have a lot of intention or direction to it. Now I'm going to be discussing how this movie stands apart from or blends into other films of the genre. I am going to be spoiling part of this movie, not going to spoil all of it, but I'm going to spoil a little bit of this movie, so if you don't want any spoilers, it was great having you, but I recommend you leave now. I did include a link to watch this movie for free on YouTube, not on a weird secondary site, but on YouTube for free in the description, so if you want to watch it for yourself, go watch it. Tell them Droolbatz sent you. After this girl starts acting weird after the seance, the group starts to get concerned. Is she having a medical problem? Is she faking to try to freak them out? Because remember, everyone who leaves makes the reward bigger for the people who are staying. So they're like, maybe she's trying to freak us out. Maybe she's a plant by the producers. The challenge of the second night is that they have to stage a photo shoot in this room where supposedly lobotomies are performed or were performed back in the day. So one of them needs to get strapped into a chair and someone else needs to, pose with the ice pick or whatever, So while they're doing that, this girl who went crazy in the seance, she's catatonic in the room she's sleeping in. All of a sudden, while they're trying to stage this photo shoot, she comes flying down the stairs and starts screaming and attacking people in the hallway. It's really freaky. They're not sure what to do, so they end up strapping her into the chair and she goes catatonic again. The others go into the kitchen. They did manage to get their photos, so they go into the kitchen and are goofing around, eating food, playing card games, things like that. And this one guy holding the camera, he's really mad that this girl is like acting super weird. He gets all up in her face and is like, oh, I bet this is just an act. Oh, he starts to get all up in her face, and all of a sudden she comes alive and her face is like a demon face. It's really freaky. He runs away in fear and she goes back to being catatonic. He runs down into the kitchen and tries to tell everyone that he's really scared, and he admits that he himself was a plant by the producers and that he was going to get a cut of the $1 million. So he was trying to scare people away and stir up drama. He's the one who put some maggots in the pizza earlier. There was some pizza and people were like, ew, there's maggots in it. Oh no, it must be a ghost. He did it. It was him. Everyone, of course, freaks out and they get mad. They're like, how dare you? Wow, we can't trust you. Then they start questioning who else might be a plant. He's genuinely concerned, though. He thinks the girl is having like a medical problem or something, so they go to check on her and she's not in the chair. She's not in the lobotomy chair, you guys. Really freaky. He gets scared and wants to leave. The others are questioning, should they stay in the haunted house? What else awaits them there? In my view, Seven Nights of Darkness is kind of the playful predecessor to a lot of the movies we see now where young kids are like doing scary stuff with their camera out and be like, go Kelsey, do it for the Vine, I'm gonna put it on YouTube, we're gonna get viral, woo, and then like a demon comes out or something. This movie felt kind of like that, but it had a more nostalgic feel. In my opinion, it was a little more creative because it was framed in the context of being a reality show, so it's like, oh, someone came behind, found this footage, and then they cleaned it up because it was filmed for a reality show, and of course the reality producers were looking for it. Movies where kids are doing it for YouTube doesn't really make as much sense to me. But yeah, this movie, I guess, kind of did it first, and did it in a fun way, in my opinion. I couldn't find a lot of reviews by other people on this movie, which is partially why I decided to review it. I did find a little bit of information. I was looking to see if I could find information on the director, and I found a website that is dedicated to literally just talking about found footage horror movies, which I think is pretty cool. And I read what they had to say. So Seven Nights of Darkness came out in 2011, which I guess was the heyday of found footage movies. That year there was, I think I read there was 58, maybe 56 movies that came out that year that were found footage horror. The people reviewing this movie and just talking about it, they had a lot more praise for it than I did. Maybe that's because, you know, they love found footage more than I do anyway. According to them, this movie really, really held up, especially in a year where there were almost 60 found footage movies. This movie stood out. I think, again, the framing of it being a reality TV competition really helped. But I don't really think it stands up as quite so memorable or as good compared to modern day horror movies. Now, modern day found footage movies, of course, we stand on the shoulders of those that came before, but I just think even though it's found footage, it could have been more organized, especially with the context that a producer was coming in behind them and re-editing it. It seems weird that there was so much time in the beginning with this insanely long introduction where nothing was really happening. The whole first part of the movie is just them running around screaming because there's mold on the wall, or there's a bat, or someone didn't clean the toilet because it's an abandoned house that's been abandoned for 100 years, so why would anyone clean the toilet? But, oh, it's so scary. That's kind of the bulk of the first part of the movie. Close to a third of the movie, I would say, is just that. These scares are not very scary, and they don't really start happening. Not a lot of plot points happen. If I was a producer coming across this, A, I wouldn't release it if people were actually dying because that's awful, but B, I would make it more interesting if I had to release it anyway, and I feel like they could have cut out a lot of that stuff at the beginning. The other main issue I had with this movie is it had too many different angles it was going for. At one point they imply that a girl got possessed, perhaps by a ghost. At another point, there's this thing with like a clearly like haunted, possessed doll. They try to make it seem like, oh, this haunted house, oh, well, it was also an asylum, so people were getting illegal, horrible lobotomies here, so there's all that atrocious crime. At one point, they try to make it seem like the house is a dimension into another world that exists outside of time. There were just a lot of elements. In my opinion, it made kind of a tangled mess where they had so many different things going on that what could have made the movie special got lost in the sauce. I do think a lot of found footage movies I've seen in more recent times, the reason I think they're a little bit better is because they tend to fixate on one single thing, like, oh, we want to discover this mystery, or like, oh, we heard there's like a haunted circle in the woods and we're gonna go look at it, instead of like, oh, like there's a haunted circle in the woods and we're trying to solve a mystery and my car is haunted and all of this stuff. This movie gave me a lot of like nostalgic and happy feelings. I liked the way people interacted on the camera. It didn't feel so performative like I tend to think of reality TV being, and like a lot of YouTube vloggers, it's very performative now. It's very, you know, they edit it all fancy, and I just liked seeing the footage being plain. I just liked seeing things. It made me feel happy and nostalgic. So I have a lot of affection for it, but I don't think it was actually good story-wise. In my opinion, when you compare this movie to the average found footage movie, it was just messier. If I had to rate this movie, I would give it a 2 out of 5 stars. I can definitely tell some people are gonna say I'm being really generous. Hear me out. I don't think it was a great movie. Like I said, the plot was messy, the sound mixing was terrible, the visuals weren't very cool, like it wasn't scary, the pacing was bad, it was just kind of a mess in general. I really enjoyed the nostalgic feeling. Maybe it wasn't that cool when it came out in 2011, but it's really giving me like the, oh, I remember when YouTube used to be, you know, a place of like skits and stuff rather than intense vloggers or like beauty makeup YouTuber drama, stuff like that. So it gave me kind of happy, nostalgic feelings that way. I really liked how they stayed within their limits. They clearly knew like, hey, we don't have a lot of resources. We have this creepy building and we can do like 1 or 2 scary things. And I think staying within their budget and within their limit, they were actually able to do a lot of, I don't know if creative is the right word, but I was impressed. It was very solid what they were able to accomplish. There are 1 or 2 scares in there that I think are decent. Those qualities that I enjoyed, the nostalgia and the creativity within their budget, don't make up for the fact that it was such a mess plot-wise, editing-wise. The sound mixing was just the worst. I just don't think those made up for it. So if I didn't think they had the good elements of being in their limits and being creative in that way, I would give it a much lower score. Like I said, I like the nostalgia of it, but that wouldn't make me give it a higher score per se. But yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts if you have any. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this review was interesting and helpful to you, and hope to see you soon. Thanks so much. Bye.